Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Linda Beard, your host and author of Bold Enough. Thank you for allowing me to be in your world for another week here as we continue this Bold Enough journey. And today we're talking about bold enough to forgive. Wow. So as I have gone through this bold enough journey, there have been people that I've had to forgive. But the most important person that I had to forgive was myself. I did not realize that there were things I had not forgiven myself for. And there were two pretty impactful things that, again, I just put in a box and put the lid on it. But eventually, healing is a process. It's a process that must take its course in order to be bold enough to be authentically you. So we're going to talk about being bold enough to forgive. And today I have a very special guest, Berniece Lenix. I call her Niecy. Mm-hmm. She also started out, just so you know, as the producer of Bold Enough, but she's kind of doing some work with me from time to time. But I miss you.
I miss you too, Miss Linda, and thank you so much for having me today.
But as we started the journey and we were going through all the chapters of my book, and when we got to the chapter summary of Bold Enough to Forgive, Niecy said to me, wow, that's my story. Sounds an awful lot like me and what I had to go through on my journey. Mm-hmm. And as you know, listeners and viewers, I'm always interested in hearing your bold enough stories and journeys. So don't hesitate if you have a bold enough story to reach out at lbeardbold-enough.com. We'll take a look at it. Would love to possibly have you come on to the show, because it's important for our viewers and listeners to be motivated. And your journey, what you went through, could be very impactful of motivating someone to do that bold enough action to be authentically them. So, Berniece, let's talk about your story of forgiveness.
Okay.
What did you discover in your life that you were harboring unforgiveness?
Well, Linda, first of all, I want to commend you on Bold Enough.
Oh, thank you.
Because my time with you has encouraged me to be bold enough to do some things too. So we thank you for this platform and the opportunity to encourage your listeners to be bold enough.
Thanks.
My journey started out with a book. I too had to do some healing. And during the pandemic, I became a member, or I should say it was a class on how to write a book. I had to do something.
Okay.
And so it was an online class. Mm-hmm. Never thought I was a writer, never wanted to really write. But I found that going to this class and writing this book was very healing for me. Mm. And so the title of the book is F the Lies. And one of the F's of the book is forgive. And what I found is that I needed to forgive two people that really love me in my life. I needed to forgive them. And as you said, I needed to forgive myself in order to get to the purpose that God had for my life. Mm-hmm. And so that's how it began. It began with a class, and the class began with a book. And the book was a process of my healing towards forgiveness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So let's talk about that. So the two people that you had to forgive, do you mind sharing who those people were?
I would definitely share.
Okay.
The first was my father. My father was an absentee father. I saw him maybe, he would come around every 5 years or so. My father, every time I saw him, he always made promises that he just did not keep. And I'm sure I am not the only one out there who's gone through that, who has an absentee father who makes, who makes claims and they just don't, they're not able to keep up with the promises. Mm-hmm. And so I was about 15 years old and I was done. I was done with the lies. I was done. And at the time I saw it as lies.
Okay. All right.
And I'll discuss that later. Yeah. I saw it as lies at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to forgive my father. I had to release him first. That's what I did at 15. I'm like, I'm done. I don't want a relationship with you at all. I didn't verbally say that to him, but in my actions, no more phone calls.
So knowing that your father, as an adult, knowing that you had to forgive your father
mm-hmm.
and going through those series of events,
mm-hmm.
how did that unforgiveness impact you?
It
as
follows
an adult.
It follows you through your entire life. It's what attaches to unforgiveness is anger, frustration, mm-hmm. depression, all the negative things that you can think of. And it goes on into other relationships as well, because I found that those gentlemen who would do just one time what my father would do would send me in an uproar.
So you're saying when you were in dating relationships,
mm-hmm.
if there was a behavior that triggered very similar to your father,
mm-hmm.
that was something that made you angry or made you walk
Definitely.
away from that relationship?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It was a trigger. Again, I released my father.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to release you too.
Got it.
Because I'm not going to I'm not doing this with you.
Got it.
So it was important for me to forgive my father.
Mm-hmm.
And being an adult, as you say now, I understand that he was a person that probably was not even able to give the love. He may have wanted to love me.
Mm-hmm.
He may have wanted to be the father for me, because he always sought me out. I never sought him out. He always sought me out. But he just wasn't. He may not have been. We never had the conversation. But as an adult, I understand that he may just didn't have the capability or capacity to be the type of dad. And so I decided to forgive him. Dad, I forgive you.
So were you able, it sounds like your father, he's no longer living. Is that the case?
That is true.
Okay. And were you able to forgive him while he was still living, or was after he had passed away?
That's an excellent question. He had passed away.
Okay.
When I had forgiven him. And it's important for you to do that. I wrote it out in a letter, and then I read the letter out loud, and then I destroyed the letter.
So you were able to release it at that point?
Yes.
Wow. And that's so powerful, because as I think about the podcast so far, and with Barbara Jackson being on, who's a grief recovery specialist, and she mm-hmm. talked about forgiving and being able to go through that process,
mm-hmm.
whether the person's living or not.
Yes, absolutely.
It's still a process that must take place.
That unforgiveness
when you're looking at forgiveness, it still must take place.
Absolutely. It has a power over you.
Because it has a power where you're allowing it to have power.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to have power, but you're allowing it when you're at that point where you have not forgiven.
Yes.
So go ahead. Tell us more.
The second person I had to forgive was my mama. Now,
wow, these are two powerful individuals that had so much influence and impact when you speak of parents that you're having to forgive.
Absolutely. And mama in a different sense. I don't really like to call it lies when it refers to her. I'll call it an untruth. Because my mama loved me, My mama was there, everything there, and sacrifice. For me, a lie is something that's done intentionally, and it's done to hurt.
Okay.
An untruth is something that is spoken to you perhaps on a daily basis, but it's not true about you. And they do it to encourage you. They say these things to build you up. But it's having the opposite effect.
Okay.
And I can give an example of that.
Yeah, please give the listeners and the viewers an example because as I listen to you, I'm thinking an untruth and a lie, regardless of the intent, intentional or to motivate.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds what you're saying for the untruths is to push you,
Yes.
to motivate you.
Yes.
It almost comes across, though, the outcome is the same.
The outcome is definitely the same.
Okay.
Absolutely. But especially when you hear it every single day. It's a part of your life. Mama growing up with my mama, and I love my mama. I'll fight you for my mama. just let that be known.
Most people would fight for their mamas.
I had a good one. But what she did as I was growing up, in school, for example, she would go to the PTA meetings. I think I'm dating myself, but that's okay. The PTA meetings, and the teachers would say, Berniece is such a good student. Berniece is so intelligent and bright, and she's this and she's that. And Mama would respond, oh, she's all right. She'll do. She's fair in the Midland. Things of that.
I haven't heard that in a while, fair to Midland.
That's why I said I'm dating myself
fair to Midland.
And dating Mama. Because I was raised by my great-grandmother, let me say that. And so she was a senior citizen by the time she was raising me. Or in church, I was the one that was always given the long speeches because Berniece has a nice voice. And
you
blah,
do,
blah,
by
blah.
the way.
Thank you so much, Miss Linda. And afterwards, Mama, everyone's Berniece, this and that and the other. And Mama would say, again, she's all right. She'll do. Now, her intentions, I believe now as an adult, was to keep me humble. She didn't want me to get the big head. And again, I also thought, as far as my teachers were concerned, you have to know that Mama was brought up. She was born in 1906, a little ways outside of slavery. And so her upbringing probably was, you keep that on the down low. You can't really
I think you're making really some impactful points there. Mm-hmm. One is that parents raise us as they learn to be raised by their parents.
Absolutely. And their experiences. Yeah.
So it kind of just continues to ebb and flow because of experience and how they were raised, not knowing that each child is different. Mm-hmm. Each child maybe have different sensitivities, right?
Absolutely.
And definitely different talents that they have. But whether they're loving outwardly in affection or whether they're more hardcore to motivate, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
So knowing that your mom had the untruths to motivate you. Your father more was lies or just didn't have the ability to follow through on his promises that you took away as lies. How was the forgiveness process for you in each of those ways? Because I really, really do want the listeners and the viewers to know that there's a lot of different ways to get to forgiveness. There's different routes that people take and how they view that all those things that were done to them.
Right.
How was it for you?
Well, what I'd like to do, if I may, I like to add one thing about how Mama's untruths affected me.
Sure.
Because we didn't address that. You had asked me that about my dad.
Yeah.
How her untruths affected me is that I would only go so far when it comes to my career. I knew that I used to be in radio. And so when they asked me to do television, I'm like, okay, I can do radio, but I can't do television. I'm good, but I ain't that good. And that's something that Mama had instilled within me.
Right.
And so I wanted to get that out too, because some people may be out there dealing with what I was dealing with, like a guy, there may be a man out there whose coach meant to push him in a way to be the best athlete, but he probably says some untruths along the way.
Okay. Got it.
So, again, even with my journey with Mama, it was the same thing. I wasn't able to, and nor do I feel in that sense, as far as forgiving her, I don't think that I would have done that face to face because, again, of her intentions or the intentions that I understood it to be. So that was something that I did after she had passed away as well.
Okay.
Is had forgiven her, written everything down. Mama, I forgive you for saying this untruth and saying that untruth. And then I had to forgive myself. As you said earlier, that's the most important thing to do, is to forgive yourself, because I allowed things to take root within me. And I lived my life in a way that I allowed opportunities to pass me by.
But let's think about that a little bit, because are you forgiving yourself for the opportunities that passed? Because you wouldn't have really, I'm thinking, as I even think about my book and writing on the chapter of forgiveness, there are things that are done to you, and naturally we respond in a way, whatever that way is for you. But do you have to forgive yourself in the way that you respond, or forgive yourself for the opportunities you let go by as a result of it?
That's good. I forgave myself for the opportunities that went by.
Okay.
That's a good point, Linda.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I forgave myself for the opportunities that went by as a result of what was done. Yeah.
That's impactful, because there are so many of us that are in that boat, I am sure, because of that, whatever the untruth or the lies were. We're emotional human beings, so we're going to, feel a certain way when something's done to us.
Absolutely.
But you're right. Just shutting down and not taking advantage of opportunities.
And that's what I did.
Because you're worth those opportunities.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I could see having to forgive yourself for just putting yourself in that state where you had limited capacity instead of opening that capacity.
Absolutely.
To be
and
all.
I let a lot of them go by. But you know what? I thank God, because He allows other opportunities to come. But
that's it. It's about, once you heal, once you begin to forgive, is if the opportunity is there and was meant for you, they start coming back around, and you're whole to be able to accept it at that time. So think in terms of, maybe those opportunities did pass you by, but you are on a different place than where you were before. And viewers and listeners, I can honestly say that had I not taken the Bold Enough journey, I would not have come 180 degrees to my purpose. I knew what my purpose was, but because of the baggage and not loving myself enough, and the responses that I would receive when I did use my purpose, it shut me down. And so I had to forgive by letting those opportunities go. And you feel some kind of way when you know that you were purposed to do this and you're not doing it.
You're not doing it.
And so remember, I was the person that just replaced things when I went through trauma. So when I went through the trauma and didn't get the results maybe that I wanted initially from using my purpose, I just replaced it. And I became big time in corporate America, right?
Right.
Done very well. But now that I'm healed, I'm to my purpose.
And like we said earlier,
and we're sitting here today.
Like you were saying earlier about giving unforgiveness power.
Right.
When you forgive, you get your power back.
Yes.
It takes the weight off.
Yes.
You're free. You feel free.
Yes.
There's a feeling of freedom.
Yes.
And so as you're saying to your listeners, it's vitally important to forgive. And I will even say the most horrendous acts. Some people may say, Berniece, that's nothing. Something else horrendous may have happened to someone else. I want them to know you have to forgive still, because if they don't, then it has power over them. They may need to have some help with that in the form of a professional a psychologist, but do it because
Yes.
it needs to happen.
Yes.
You need to get your power back. You need to forgive because that'll always, it'll weigh you down.
Yes.
It kills you. It kills you. It kills your life.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about, have you ever been in a situation where you are interacting with an individual ongoing and maybe it's a unhealthy type of interaction, but you, for whatever reasons, you don't want them to walk out of your life. That's probably the main reason.
Mm-hmm.
And you just continue to allow the collateral damage to continue.
Mm-hmm.
But you're like, I just need to like forgive this person and then set my boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Have you faced that? Because life goes on and every day it's a forgiveness mode, right?
Absolutely.
Almost every day.
Absolutely.
Something's
And
going to happen that's going to hurt our
taught me that.
feelings.
You and I were in a discussion, and I'm glad you brought it up. You brought it up to your listeners because that's key. What you had told me is that forgiveness is an everyday process.
Yes.
Because someone else is going to come that needs forgiveness, and
Yes.
a relationship, ladies, is one of those times when grace needs to be granted. Is to me that's what forgiveness is too. It's
Yes.
about granting them grace,
Yes.
and like you said, setting those boundaries.
Yes.
If you setting them, period. What are you going to take? What are you not going to take? And it's
Right.
okay to do so.
Right.
Once again, you don't want to release your power slowly
Yes.
and let it build.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I used to be so I'm not going to use the word afraid, but I was so considerate about other people's feelings to the point that my feelings didn't count.
I wasn't that lady, but okay.
Yeah, my feelings didn't count. I mean, because I think when you get in that mode where people pleasing, which I'll talk more about on a different podcast show, that people pleasing can send you down a road, which it did in my marriage. That I finally walked away after 29 years and went through the whole forgiveness thing for that. So I just want listeners to know that it's okay to have boundaries and to protect yourself, even when it comes to seeing triggers that from your past that you've had to heal from, and you're walking towards, that tightrope.
Right. And let me say this while you're saying that. You don't want to get like I was, because like I said, I didn't have that issue, people pleasing.
Okay.
Because of unforgiveness. That was, I've been saying, I'll cut you loose.
That's good. That's good.
So you don't want to get to that.
Yeah.
You don't want to be extreme either way.
Either way.
Right.
Either way,
Set
just
your boundaries,
knowing,
find your balance.
just knowing that forgiveness is necessary and
Yes.
forgiveness is something you have to do in order to be free.
In order to be free.
We could continue this conversation, I know, for a long period of time.
We do talk a lot.
But I just want to do a few takeaways for our listeners and viewers, and that is you have to forgive in order to be free.
Yes.
And forgiveness is an ongoing, daily occurrence because life happens. So once you get into the mindset that you ongoingly need to forgive others that have done something to you, or forgive yourself for something that you did, then life will get easier for you and freedom will come easier. Because once you experience freedom and the joy, and you're down to the core of who you are authentically, you don't want the baggage to start piling up again. So be bold enough to forgive. So any parting words before we let our viewers and listeners go?
Parting words.
Yes.
I don't part easy.
Parting words.
I keep talking and talking.
I know,
talking.
but
You
parting
said it-
words.
You said it well. What you just said, we can stop right there.
Okay.
Is that forgiveness is an ongoing process, and you want to do it continuously. So again, you don't renege on your power. And oh my goodness, something just left me. The joy you talked about.
Yes.
When you get there, listeners, you'll never want to release it.
Yes.
Nor should you. You'll never want to release it.
Yes.
You become authentically yourself every single time,
Yes.
more and more and more and more. The more you say yes to opportunities you probably missed because you have forgiven.
Yes.
The more you want to live and go out because, this person has done something horrendous and you're in the house stuck because you're afraid to face the world. Forgiving will release you to go out into the world and live your best life. And so it's extremely important to forgive so you can get your power back, so
Yes.
you can get you
Yes.
back.
Yes. So listeners, be bold enough to forgive. Don't be fearful about taking those bold actions to protect yourself because you are so worth it. And I will share with you that I have some friends out there that need to forgive and to move on. And I know that you can do it. And so do it. So bold enough, we're here to support and encourage you every single week. I want you to get out there. I want you to be bold enough. Remember everything that you've been motivated to do so far. And that's first, make the decision to be bold enough. Do the hard work to be bold enough. And you know that being bold enough to forgive is a part of that hard work. But you're worth it. And I know that you can do it. So I will see you next week on Bold Enough. Have a great week.